My name is Samira. I am 25 years old and belong to a Pathan family from Peshawar. I am 4 feet 10 inches tall, with a complexion as fair as milk, and I possess a very attractive physique. I was married at the age of 19 to my paternal aunt's son, Asif, who works a government job. However, it was a middle-class family, and after marriage, the luxuries of my father's house vanished. I couldn't wear my preferred clothes like jeans and shirts, nor did my husband own a car for me to fulfill my passion for driving. Within a year of marriage, my mother-in-law began taunting me because I hadn't conceived a child. Asif started visiting me only once a week, and after 3 months, he began avoiding me altogether. Over the next 2 years, the taunts from my mother-in-law and sisters-in-law turned me rebellious. I confronted Asif and gave him my final decision: either keep me in a separate house or give me a divorce. Asif became distressed and later told me he had arranged a position for me in an NGO working in the flood-affected areas of Dera Ismail Khan. He asked me to spend 3 months there while he set up a separate home for us. Since I had worked in an NGO before marriage, I agreed. On September 6, 2022, I left Peshawar for Dera Ismail Khan. I finally felt a sense of freedom away from that suffocating environment. On my first day at the office, I wore my favorite jeans and shirt. My 45-year-old boss was instantly captivated. Within 2 days, he informed me that he had requested a vehicle for me from the head office. Whenever we went for surveys in flood-hit areas, he would take me in his car. I was 22 at the time and 3 years into my marriage. I also started talking to a colleague named Kashif, who was over 6 feet tall and very handsome. The breakdown in the wilderness. 15 days later, my boss handed me the car keys and invited me to dinner at a famous hotel. That day, I had to collect a complete list and data of women from a village. My boss initially offered to come along, but he received a call about his son's accident and had to leave. He told me to take another girl from the office, but no one was willing to go as they were jealous of the boss's kindness toward me. I went to my quarters, showered, put on black jeans and a pink half-sleeve t-shirt, put on my glasses, and drove off. No one there knew I was married. It was a marriage in name only anyway. I left at 3 p.m. The village was 35 kilometers from Dera Khan, 24 kilometers of paved road and 11 kilometers of dirt track filled with flood-induced ditches. While on the way, the boss called. I lied and said I was with the elderly woman from my quarters to avoid being called back. He canceled the dinner due to his son's accident. I reached the village at 5 p.m. By the time I finished my work, it was dark. On my way back, halfway through the dirt track, the car suddenly stopped. There was no mobile service. I checked the battery terminals but couldn't start it. I stood outside in the silence and darkness. Suddenly, a terrifying sound of a wild animal came from the bushes. Terrified, I locked myself inside the car. Around 9 p.m., a man appeared, a 6.5-foot-tall man in a white shirt and dhoti with a turban. I stepped out and told him I was from an NGO and my car had broken down. He stared at me silently. Finally, he said, "There are jackals and pigs here, come to my house." A night in the village. I followed him to a small mud house. He lived alone, his wife had passed away 10 years ago. He offered me rice, which I politely declined at first but eventually sat on the cot. He eventually fell asleep on another cot, his snoring filling the room. I stayed awake in deep thought. At dawn, I decided to leave, though I didn't know the exact direction of my car. I walked until I was exhausted and sat under a tree. Suddenly, I heard a tractor. I waved my bag, and the driver saw me. He was surprised to see a fashionable girl in the wilderness. The driver, Rabnawaz, told me I was walking in the wrong direction and offered a lift. He gave me a white shawl to cover my jeans, as they weren't considered appropriate in that area. We reached my car. Rabnawaz looked at me and confessed he had fallen in love with my beauty. To keep things safe, I told him I would think about it and asked for his number, promising to call. He trusted my Pathan's word. He fixed a minor issue with the car using pliers from his tractor, and the engine roared to life. Return to the city. I reached the city at 10:30 a.m., hungry and tired. I bought some food and went back to my quarters. I lied to the office and my boss, saying I was unwell. I spent the next few days resting and visiting the Indus River at night for peace. Back at the office, everyone, especially Kashif, was worried. My boss invited me to dinner again, and this time I wore jeans and a strong perfume. We ate at a fast food place by the river. Later, Kashif also took me out on his motorcycle and expressed his desire to marry me. I gave him a vague, hopeful answer. The distribution day. 3 days later, I told my boss my mother was unwell and I wanted to go to Peshawar. He gave me 20,000 rupees and told me to help with a distribution in the village first, after which I could head home for the weekend. On Friday, I drove toward the village, stocking up on snacks for the long journey to Peshawar. Relief trucks had already arrived, and a crowd had gathered. I put on my dark glasses, held the list of affectees, and called out, "Everyone, please form a line." The crowd immediately began to organize. Here is the second part of Samira's story, expanding on the distribution day, her encounter with her past, and the complications that arise from her dual life. Part 2. The crossroads of desire and duty. As I stood there with my clipboard, the sun beating down on the dusty plains of Dera Ismail Khan, I felt like a queen commanding her subjects. The villagers, desperate for aid, looked at me with a mix of awe and hope. I could feel the eyes of my colleagues, especially Kashif and Sir Amjad, constantly drifting toward me. In my heart, I knew I was playing a dangerous game, but the adrenaline of this newfound freedom was intoxicating. The shadow of the past. While I was calling out names from the list, a familiar face caught my eye in the crowd. It was the old man from that night, the one whose house I had stayed in. He was standing near the back, looking at me with squinted eyes. My heart skipped a beat. If he recognized me as the girl who fled his house in the middle of the night, or worse, if he saw me without the Pathan shawl Rabnawaz had given me, my reputation in this conservative area would be ruined. I quickly adjusted my sunglasses and turned my focus to the other side of the line. Just then, a loud horn honked. It was a tractor. My blood ran cold. It was Rabnawaz. He hopped off his tractor, looking rugged and confident. He didn't come to the line, he walked straight toward the NGO staff area. He was looking for me. I tried to stay busy with the paperwork, but he spotted me. A slow smile spread across his face, a look of possessive recognition. A collision of worlds. "Samira Bibi," he called out loudly enough for Kashif to hear. Kashif, who had been hovering near me all morning, stepped forward, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow. "Do you know this man, Samira?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. I had to think fast. He helped me when my car broke down a few days ago," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Rabnawaz walked right up to us. "I see you kept your promise of wearing the clothes you like," he said in Saraiki, nodding at my jeans. Then he leaned in closer. "But don't forget your other promise, Patani." "I am waiting for that call." Sir Amjad joined us, sensing the tension. "Is there a problem here?" I forced a smile. "No, sir. Just a local resident who assisted me with the vehicle. He was just leaving." I gave Rabnawaz a sharp, meaningful look, a silent plea to stay quiet. He chuckled, tipped his head, and walked back to his tractor, but the damage was done. Kashif looked hurt, and Sir Amjad looked curious. The departure for Peshawar. By 4 p.m., the distribution was over. I was exhausted but desperate to leave. I needed to get to Peshawar, not just to see my family, but to escape the suffocating web I was weaving in Dera Khan. Sir Amjad walked me to my car. He handed me another envelope. "For your mother's treatment," he whispered. I felt a pang of guilt. My mother wasn't actually sick, but I took the money. I needed every penny for the separate house dream I was still clinging to. "Drive safely, Samira. And remember, my heart stays here until you return on Monday," Sir Amjad said, his voice thick with emotion. I nodded, got into the car, and sped away. As soon as I hit the highway, I pulled over and changed out of my jeans into a traditional, modest shalwar kameez. I wiped off the heavy makeup. I had to transform back into a Sif's wife before reaching Peshawar. The cold reality of home. The 6-hour drive gave me time to think. I missed the thrill of Dera Khan already. Reaching Peshawar felt like entering a prison. When I walked into my in-laws' house, the smell of stale curry and the sound of my sister-in-law's shrill voice greeted me. Asif was there. He looked tired and older than his years. "How was the NGO work?" he asked, not even looking up from his phone. "It's hard work, Asif. I'm doing it for us," I lied. That night, as I lay in the room that felt smaller than ever, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "I saw you change your clothes by the roadside. You look beautiful in everything, but I prefer the Pathani I met in the woods, Rabnawaz." I froze. He had followed me. The freedom I thought I had found was starting to feel like